Well, at long last, here we are. The arrival of the much anticipated Snow White has come and gone, leaving in its wake nothing but derision, empty theaters, and a solid flop, making only $43 million over the opening weekend. Now, full disclosure, I 100% only went to hate watch Snow White, and honestly, I had a blast. But not because of the movie itself. Oh no. Because, as we all suspected, Disney's Snow White remake is pretty terrible. So, like the ghoulish monsters who want to see Disney's downfall that we all are, let's dive right into it. Going forward, there are going to be minor spoilers for the 2025 Snow White movie, but the story is essentially the same as the original, so I don't know, do with that information what you will. Anywho, without any further ado, let's jump into Disney's crowning achievement of 2025, shall we? The film opens with an extended sequence showing us what a wonderful, happy life Snow White had as a child. She lives with her parents in a communist utopia with peasant and ruler alike dancing and singing and living together in utter harmony. But then, tragically, Snow White's mother dies and her father remarries, and we are introduced to the evil queen, played wholeheartedly, if not very convincingly, by Gal Gadot. More on this later. The king leaves to fight a war but never returns and is assumed to be dead, and the child Snow White is kept as a servant by the evil queen. The princess grows up a prisoner as the kingdom slowly falls into ruin under the disastrous rule of the greedy queen. Snow White, actually, you know what? No, I'm not doing this. Rachel Zegler is not Snow White. I don't care how hard the movie tries to convince me otherwise. She's not white. She's not snowy. I don't care if she was born in a blizzard or whatever. We're gonna go with something more accurate. Something like Stacy. Yeah, Stacy fits. So anyway, Stacy only becomes aware of the dire consequences that her kingdom is in when she finds a thief pilfering potatoes from the pantry one day. FYI, this thief is rather important as he is taking the place of the prince in the original Snow White. This not a prince, Jonathan, informs her of how bad it has gotten in the kingdom, and in a lapse of judgment, Stacy decides to go talk to her stepmother about it. In a shocking turn of events, the evil queen decides to continue to be evil and does not grant Stacy's request to help out the commoners. Jonathan is captured, but Stacy helps him escape, and the evil queen, deciding that Stacy is starting to get a bit problematic, decides to get rid of her. At the queen's behest, the huntsman takes Stacy out into the woods, but before he kills the princess, he has a change of heart and allows Stacy to escape. Stacy flees deep into the forest and, with the help of the animals there, finds her way to the house of the seven eldritch abominations. Speaking of the abominations, we are treated to a full reveal of them working in the mines, as well as a painfully extended and very badly updated version of the classic Hi Ho song. The seven eldritch abominations come home and discover Stacy sleeping in their beds, and after some arguing, they agree to let her spend the night. By the way, the dwarves are no longer comic relief, and don't you even think about laughing at the beloved Dopey of the original cartoon. Don't you realize it isn't nice to make fun of people who are different? Yeah, there's a whole arc there. We'll get to it in a bit. The next day, Stacy decides to go off and find Jonathan, who is the leader of a small group of bandits, because she thinks her long missing father may actually be alive, and that Jonathan knows where he is. She finds Jonathan and his fellow bandits, but their meeting is interrupted by the evil queen's guards, who arrive on scene and attack them. Although the group is eventually able to fight off the guards, Jonathan is wounded when he jumps in front of Stacy and takes an arrow meant for her. They bring him back to the house of the seven abominations, where Doc then saves his life. After this, the bandits and the seven eldritch abominations, along with Stacy and Jonathan, have dinner together, and we are subjected to one of the most unconvincing love songs, if it can even be called that, I've ever heard. Probably shoehorned in at the last moment in a desperate attempt to prove to the audience that, see, there is a love story. We promise, there really is.
Really?
Really, really?
Soon after, Jonathan is recaptured and imprisoned by the evil queen. Tired of her attempts to kill Stacy going awry, the evil queen decides to handle things herself and retires into her secret laboratory. In the absolutely lamest way imaginable, she transforms into an old crone. She just puts 2 drops of some magic potion into a waiting goblet and drinks it, and then she transforms. That's it. It was so underwhelming. Then the evil queen creates the poison apple and heads off to find her stepdaughter. Stacy, meanwhile, is at the house of the 7 eldritch abominations, preparing to leave and search for her father. When the evil queen, disguised as the crone, arrives and tells her Jonathan has been captured, Stacy decides to abandon her search for her father and go help Jonathan instead. Before she leaves, the crone somehow convinces her to take a bite of the poisoned apple, which she does. The queen then reveals her identity and tells Stacy that not only is the king actually dead, but that she is the one responsible for it. After hearing this, Stacy succumbs to the poisoned apple and the crone disappears before the 7 eldritch abominations, alerted by the forest animals, arrive on scene, too late to help. Jonathan, meanwhile, escapes his imprisonment and comes looking for Stacy, and finds her laid out on the ground with the 7 eldritch abominations gathered around in mourning. In a frankly astonishing turn of events, Jonathan does, in fact, wake Stacy with a non-consensual kiss.
Inconceivable!
Although they made up for that by having it be the least convincing true love's kiss of all time. Once she recovered and realizing that her father is gone for good, Stacy vows to get her kingdom back from the evil queen, so she marches back into town determined to face her stepmother. With the whole town behind her, even though she's literally never said anything to them for the entire movie, Stacy has a standoff with the evil queen, who orders her guards to kill Stacy. But the princess appeals to the guards' better natures and reminds them of the good old days under her parents' rule, and this is somehow enough to convince them all to turn against the evil queen. Her plans thus thwarted, the queen flees to her magic mirror, closely followed by Stacy. The magic mirror decides once and for all that Stacy is, in fact, the fairest of them all, and in a fit of rage the evil queen smashes the mirror. She turns into a black statue and then is sucked into the broken mirror, which reforms behind her, trapping her within. The movie ends with the whole town dressed in white, celebrating the return of communism, singing and dancing around joyously. Honestly, I had very low expectations for this movie going in. I think everybody did. And to be fair, it was slightly better than I thought it would be. Now, mind you, I had a very low bar, so that's not really saying that much, but still. That doesn't mean it was good, however. It wasn't. For one thing, the whole movie was embarrassingly cringe. Everything, from the carefully updated songs to the very pointed messaging running throughout the movie, was horrifically cringy. Disney was trying way too hard with this one. And really, considering what they had to work with, I can't even blame them. But that's hardly an excuse. The costuming in this movie was also awful. I have seen higher quality costumes on the discount rack at Walmart. Everything looked cheap and garish, which is a shame since I get the feeling the movie wanted the costuming to be fun and harken back to better times in the Disney universe. And while I didn't hate what the costuming was trying to do, the problem is it just looked so cheap, which is unacceptable considering how much this movie cost. The acting also left a lot to be desired. Rachel Zegler was fine, I guess. There's nothing overtly horrible about her performance, but every time her face came on screen, all I could think about was, well, Rachel Zegler.
And therefore it's extremely dated.
Her acting was decent enough, though, and she could certainly sing, even if the songs weren't all that good. Gal Gadot, on the other hand, she's a beautiful woman, and I mean absolutely no disrespect to her, but she cannot sing, and she cannot act. Bless her, though, you could tell she was putting her whole heart into the role, and I think that should definitely count for something. And on the plus side, despite the cheap costuming, she looked absolutely fantastic. Although this is Gal Gadot we're talking about, you could put her in a garbage sack and she'd look amazing. And yet, we're supposed to believe she was jealous of her stepdaughter's looks. Still not sure what Disney was thinking with that one. I would be remiss, of course, if I didn't mention the elephant in the room. We already knew we had this nightmare fuel to look forward to, but damn. Bad as it was, the trailer did not prepare us for facing these monstrosities. All of the dwarves had a creepy, doll come to life vibe to them. But the worst of the uncanny valley effect fell on poor Dopey's shoulders. I mean, look at that face. It kind of reminds me of another CGI horror, those kids from the Polar Express. And that leads me to another problem with the film, Dopey. For some reason, known only to God and themselves, the Disney overlords decided that it was time to update Dopey for a modern age. Because,
And therefore, it's extremely dated.
gone is the endearing, slightly goofy young dwarf of the original. This Dopey has a tragic life. He is bullied and picked on by the others because he's different, to the point where he stays silent out of fear. That's right, we get a backstory for why Dopey doesn't talk. We're treated to a lovely little arc where Dopey finds the courage to talk, all thanks to Stacy. Isn't it just so wonderful? It really brings a tear to your eye.
That is without a doubt the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You are a fucking idiot.
Frankly, I almost wish Disney had just cut the dwarves out of this movie entirely. They really didn't add anything to the actual plot, and having them on screen was not only a waste of time, but an assault on our eyes. Not that the bandits would have been all that much better, but at least they were played by real people. Speaking of the bandits, it was pretty obvious that there had been some desperate rewrites after the initial backlash to the movie. Out of the maybe 5 or 6 different storylines running rampant through the movie, a couple of them weren't all that bad and might even have been interesting. Unfortunately, the whole thing was a confusing disaster, with competing ideas and stories only loosely stitched together, resulting in a jumbled mess of a movie that jumped from scene to scene, desperately trying to do too much. It skipped over scenes that were actually interesting and spent way too much time on scenes that added little or nothing at all to the overall story. The bandits clearly had originally been intended to take up more space in the film, and were likely edited out of much of it following the outrageous backlash from the now infamous leaked photos. The resulting scenes left you with the uncanny feeling that there was a previous scene you were supposed to have watched, but never did, leaving huge gaps in the story. Meanwhile, there is very little time spent developing the evil queen and her relationship with the magic mirror. Even less was devoted to explaining why the queen hated Stacy as much as she did. And that's to say nothing of the magic mirror itself, who was barely a character in the movie, who randomly switched up the definition of fair from being beautiful to fair meaning a good person, without any real rhyme or reason. That's not to say it was all bad. As I mentioned before, there were a couple of story threads that had a lot of promise, and I personally quite liked the character of Jonathan. I don't think it was necessary to change him from being a prince, but it's not the most offensive change they made in the film. And while he was unfinished and definitely needed more character development, I thought he was far and away the best character of the movie. I enjoyed all the scenes he was in, and while it was rushed, he did have a character arc, and would say it was the most satisfying one of the movie. Snow White is arguably one of the most controversial movies of all time, and it was that way even before it premiered. Considering it had so much attention before it even came out, I was very curious to see if the movie was as bad as everyone thought it would be. Was it? Well, yes and no. I personally had a blast watching this movie because I was there to make fun of it, and that's what I did. That being said, it was a long way from being a good movie. I don't want to give Disney any extra credit than I have to, but there were some parts of the remake that had promise. I think somewhere in there, buried deep under controversy, ideology, and bad writing, there was a good Snow White adaptation that I would probably have genuinely enjoyed. The problem is, the Snow White remake is too caught up in its personal issues to ever be able to live up to that faint promise. I think the issue with the 2025 Snow White is not necessarily with the movie itself. It's what it represents. This movie was intended to be a remake of the movie that launched Disney as a company, so there was always a lot of pressure facing this movie, and it had big shoes to fill. And it just didn't. The problem is, Disney wasn't content with simply remaking the original. Not that the 1937 Snow White needed to be remade, but we'll leave that aside. Disney had to also try and improve on it. And by improve on it, I mean fill it with propagandist material that shits on the original movie rather than honoring it. And with this one, I think Disney violated the last shreds of trust it might have had with its consumers by mangling one of the most beloved Disney animations of all time. I wish I could say that this is the movie that will finally make Disney realize just how far it has fallen, how much it has screwed up. But if I'm being entirely honest with you, I don't think it will. Disney is too far gone at this point. I don't know if there's a flop big enough to make the company see sense. Unless, of course, we're treated to another Acolyte. And I don't know if even Disney is capable of that. I mean, the Acolyte is one of a kind. Ultimately, the 2025 Snow White is only going to make an impression in this world because of all the controversy mixed up with it. I think without Rachel's little comments, this movie would probably have been just another Disney remake. Forgettable, not very good, but it would not have the huge backlash that this movie is facing down. But, for better or worse, this movie has become one of the most universally despised films out there. Not even the critics like it, and that's saying something. Anywho, on that happy note, that's all I've got for today. If you agree, disagree, or have thoughts of your own to share, or if you were one of the brave folk who dared to go see the Snow White remake and you want to share your survival story, then just drop a line or two below, and I will see you, wonderful peeps, next time. Bye!